Welcome back to the Literacy Lunch Break. We are excited to continue talking about literacy wins this year. Today we have Caroline Ventresca and Kathie Saia sharing their wins in their kindergarten classrooms. Thank you so much for joining us today, Caroline and Kathie.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to talk to you because you are a special pair. Typically, as we have teachers join us and talk about their wins, it's typically one teacher, one classroom, but you both are co-teaching and working together. And I would love for you to share with our listeners just what that looks like before we begin to talk about literacy wins.
Yeah, so Caroline and I met on the very first day of school 6 years ago, and it was just perfect. We were a perfect pairing without even trying. So we teach a kindergarten integrated co-teaching classroom where there are a number of kids who are moving along at a regular rate, and then there's some kids who are struggling and have IEPs, and so we pair up and work together to fill those gaps and try to accelerate kids to get back on the right track. Did you want to add anything?
Well, I just wanted to say, as a Gen Ed teacher, I was used to working by myself, so moving into an ICT setting was a little bit more challenging for me because I'm used to the full control. But I'm so grateful that I was able to have this opportunity because I've learned so much from Kathie about how to work with our kids who have needs and disabilities. So it's been amazing to be able to collaborate together and really help all of these kids.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And I'm sure you have many of wins professionally of just learning to work together. And I'm so glad you shared that, Caroline, right? As I said, many of us in our classrooms, we are collaborative, but you're used to kind of that control and really making all of the decisions. And while partnership and collaboration so important and so critical, it's also an adjustment. And so I would love to hear, especially as we think about your unique situation and literacy wins. That's really what we want to talk about with this series. But I think maybe you can share a little bit of both, like a win of collaborating and working together and learning from each other and partnering, and then what you see in turn with your students and the impact that it has on them.
Do you want to talk about phonemic awareness first? So we can touch on that. I would say that we were struggling to meet the needs of kids who were getting the tier 1 instruction, but were just not picking up the skills. Mm-hmm. And we were like, how do we get them there? And through a lot of research and a lot of conversation, and I would say that we're very fortunate to have an administrative team here that is willing to, here at Go On to Central, to give us that latitude to try new things. And when we presented to them, they were all excited about trying this out. And then we brought it in, and within 10 weeks, we could not believe the amount of growth that happened. And that particular year, we actually had a student who had a cochlear implant. So her hearing was impaired, and we could not believe in 10 weeks of that phonemic awareness instruction that she went from being a non-reader to being a reader.
Oh, and they were in masks.
And we were in masks at the end of COVID.
Oh,
so our first year together was during COVID.
Yeah.
So it was wild. And I would say we were very new partners, learning each other's styles and philosophies. I would say I tend to be a little bit more serious, and Caroline really helped me have more fun. So I needed that.
She did.
And that, I did. She did. But Caroline actually has brought so much knowledge base for me as a special ed teacher, because in special education, you move at a little bit slower pace.
Right.
You have a little bit more time with kids individually. But if we want to get kids back into tier 1, we got to move at a little bit faster pace, accelerate that learning. So,
can I speak about the writing now?
Absolutely.
I really, because I'm super excited about the writing. We've been working for years. I mean, every year, I feel like all teachers are like, we really need to focus on writing. And we would say that, and we would look at our year at a glance, and we would, kind of do it, kind of not. And last year when the Bridge to Writing came out, we were like, we need to do this because we were missing that explicit instruction in writing. And I think for me, when I was on my own, you know, you 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 don't have that clear roadmap of like, what should our kindergartners be able to do,
Right.
what's an appropriate pace for this, and how do I get them there. So this writing program specifically has been a game changer for us, because I'm like, oh, I don't need them to be able to do all of the things the second week. So
Right.
we've really gone really slowly with it. And I don't know, we're in Buffalo, so we have a snow day like every other day, it feels like. So we're trying to
My kids would
kind
be
of,
so jealous.
it's yeah, but then you get to the point where you're like, I need to be teaching them, like we
Right.
need that
No,
back,
absolutely.
So we're in week 10 right now, and the things that our kids can do that we haven't been able to do in the past, like just looking at the structure of a sentence, looking for all of those things that they need to have. When we looked at our data from our progress monitoring from last year even to this year, the structure of sentences are down, and them being able to identify the noun and the verb in the sentence, and be able to look at reading and be able to identify the noun and the verb in a sentence in anything we're reading has been huge. So they're getting like a deeper understanding of sentences, of grammar. I mean, everything has really changed for us. And I'm so grateful for that, because it's taken a lot of pressure off of us, because it's manageable, and it's manageable for the kids, and they actually love writing, which I've never really experienced that before.
Right.
I mean, we were always doing like, we're going to journal and write about this. And then they were like, well, what do you want me to do? And it's,
Exactly.
that writer's workshop, not that it wasn't beneficial, but this is explicit. We are in it, and they're doing amazing. So I'm so
I
proud of
kind of
that.
hear you saying two things, and I love it, because it really, I feel like it's a theme that kind of runs through this series, is as we think about those wins. I think it's important, and again, why we wanted to do this series is we recognize there needs to be a shift, a change, right? With our literacy instruction, that means reading, that means writing, and that can feel really heavy, and sometimes it feels like you're just like running up this hill and you're never reaching the top. And it's important for us to recognize the growth and the milestones that we're hitting and the changes that we're making. And as we think about that change, it really is the knowledge and the understanding of what we need to teach, that explicit teaching. But I also love that you talk about the joy and the engagement and the importance of letting this be really fun for kids, because especially when they're young, this is exciting. This is new. This is something that they're learning how to do. And when we clue them in, and we give them that clear guidance and understanding and explicit instruction, that sets them up for success, and they know what to do. And sometimes explicit instruction gets that bad name, right? That bad, oh, that's so boring. And it's actually what kids need to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that we struggled with, was because we were researching to find out what would work with our kids. And we would find, I would say, structures or strategies for grades second and up. But you really couldn't find something that was really concentrating on kindergarten, first, and second. And so the other part that I really like from a special education perspective is that all of our students are able to gain access to the curriculum worked in the bridge to writing, meaning that if they can't yet, write the word, then there's space for them to have it dictated, or there's space for them just to engage just in drawing a picture and then talking to us, building the oral language component, and then sharing with their friends. So that's the one thing that I would say that, to me, while I know it wasn't necessarily written for children with disabilities, it's accessible to our students that have disabilities, and they are feeling success, and they're not feeling left out of that process. So I love that for our kids who struggle. So.
Yes. And that's actually a really good segue into the next question is, as we think about these wins and the impact and the growth that we're seeing in students academically, we know the importance of building a classroom environment that is really cohesive to learning, that's a safe environment, that we're all working together, and we recognize, really all grades have a variety of needs. Some classrooms are going to have a wider range of needs and, maybe more specific needs. And I feel like kindergarten is always that gamble of like, you don't always know what you're getting, right?
Yeah.
So
Most of the time.
exactly.
From Friday to Monday, you never know.
From the morning to the afternoon.
Yeah,
I was just going to say morning to
Yeah.
afternoon, right?
Right.
And I would love for our listeners to hear, especially from both of you, who, again, we all have a wide range of needs, but you really have a wider range of needs as we think about some of those, students with IEPs or maybe more specific needs. How do you create an environment where students do feel safe learning, do understand that I love the way you said, this is accessible to everybody. This is our tier 1, but yes, there's going to be some differentiation or some different needs along the way. I'd love for our listeners to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, I'd say over the years, when Caroline and I met, she did have a list of like routines and rituals that she would go through every year. And what we started to do over the last few years, and I would say, I guess we also want people to know, teachers of all levels, that these things didn't happen overnight. Mm-hmm. These are things that we've struggled and talked about and experimented with. And every year, in fact, today we were just having another conversation about how do we shift it again, because this is what we're seeing in the needs based on the data that we're collecting. But I would say that we have spent a lot of time being very serious about identifying the rules and the routines of our classroom. And while it's, I would say, somewhat painful at the beginning of the school year, we spend a good month really practicing those routines and rituals before we get started.
I do. Because I think we do spend a lot of time on social emotional learning too. So those moments where there's failure, we're teaching the kids how to respond to a friend who's struggling, and that failures are okay and successes are okay. And I want to tell this story about last year. It's one of our, I would say, probably one of the best moments of my teaching career happened. And it was like, you couldn't pay the kid enough to say what he said when our assistant superintendent walked in. So we are talking about data constantly with our kids. We're like, come and look at this. Look at what you did and what's going on over here. And what do you think happened there? And like, we conference with them after. We'll do a growth monitor or progress monitor or any of our formatives. We'll sit and we'll chat with them. So we had just gotten done with our spring benchmark in iReady, because that's our assessment tool. And one of our lowest babies, no, they're all our babies. One of our lowest babies jumped up huge, like we were crying. We were all dancing around. My assistant superintendent walked in, and one of my favorite kids said to her, "Did you see Robert's data and how he went up?" And it was like, he wasn't celebrating himself. He was celebrating his friend, who it was like, we all knew that Robert struggled. He worked, and it was like, he was celebrating him, and that didn't happen by chance. That was a constant conversation of like, how do we support each other? But then how do we fail in a safe space? Yes. And like Kathie said, I think having those rules and routines and things in structure, I feel like they feel so safe in that they can make mistakes, and then they're having all of these other successes. We have one of our kids who's got an IEP this year, and he was like, I can do this. I'm doing this. And it's like, that's all it's about.
Yes.
And our kids have changed so much, even from when I started teaching 25 years ago to, we are always bringing up COVID, but wow, that's been hugely impactful on our kids in their oral language. And like Kathie said, with that bridge to writing, with that sharing piece that our kids are doing, it's like we build it into all of our lessons, but that's like a non-negotiable. It's like, we are sharing what we just wrote now. So we're going to practice, and then we're going to share. So, there's just so many things, but like Kathie said, it didn't happen overnight. Right. It has taken us years to pull things out, push things in, and what's happening now, working for us, may not work next year. We are totally always responding to the little kids that we have sitting in front of us.
I think the other thing, well, a couple other things, well, a million things, right? But, I think the kids know that we really like them. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
really love them as people. And so I think that they know that it's okay to go through whatever it is that they're going through. And our kids, as many kids all over this country, there's lots of things going on for these little people. They know
Right.
they can come and talk to us about it. I think the other thing that we really work on is being super hyper focused on the skills that are missing, because when those skills are filled in for kids, they
Mm-hmm.
develop some confidence, which
Yep.
leads into confidence, and then we start to see that growth in many ways. Like we have a particular student this year who doesn't like to verbalize, and my only goal for him was to say hi. That was it. Just say hi.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're starting to hear like more. For a month, we only worked on saying hi. And
Right.
now he's responding to questions like, how are you? And tell your friend, what did you have for dinner last night? So those baby steps, which seem so minuscule,
Mm.
sometimes is the breaking point for kids to like make that huge leap for success. So
Yes. I mean, I hear so much of, yeah, as I'm listening to you speak, of pulling out those pieces that are so critical to, again, literacy instruction, but really creating that environment, because you can't learn if you don't feel safe, right?
right.
It's not going to happen. So I think I've said this already before, but you can have the best curriculum in the world, or you can have all of the knowledge in the world. But if your students aren't ready to learn, if they don't feel safe or comfortable in their environment learning, they're not going to learn it, even if you're trying to teach it. But it sounds like you're really great at cluing. And I think that's important. And sometimes we don't do that with our young, our babies, but really cluing them into their learning and that process of, this is where you are. And like, this is where we're going to go, and look, and like, let's talk about where you're at on the way there. And let's celebrate those successes. And I think celebrate those challenges, because our brains learn by making mistakes, right? And so helping our students understand that, I think, is so critical, and having them be part of that journey, and not some like secret thing that they don't understand why this is hard for them, or what they need to learn next. But I also heard you talking about being, collecting the data, but not just collecting it, right? Because I
Yeah.
mean, I've been a teacher, I've been a literacy coach, I've been an administrator. I know how sometimes we can get caught in that trap of just like, okay, it's assessment time, and oh, here's our red, here's our, here's our yellow, here's our green, and just like, and then we move on. But really using that assessment to be reflective, to drive your instruction, so they can be successful, and adjusting based on those needs.
I want to say too, this year has kind of been a game changer for our entire kindergarten team, because what we're doing is we're warehousing data in ESGI. And then as a team, we're pulling that data apart, and we're putting kids in different intervention groups. So all of the teachers on the team are working on specific skills with all of the kids in kindergarten. So that's been huge for us too, because then it's almost like, we were talking to our assistant about it today. It's like, as a teacher, data can be scary, because you think it's really truly a reflection of your instruction. Well, part of it is, but part of it's also like, how do they need to learn? So
Right.
sitting and talking about our best practices in our room, and what are you doing that I need to be doing, has almost numbed us to the data, because we're looking at the data so much that it's like, well, now we're going to put these kids in intervention groups. We're going to really target that. And then we're seeing success. And we're having, because what do we want to sit around and talk about all day long? We want to talk about our kids' data, how they're improving, what we can do to help it. And we want to talk about our craft, because our craft is why we, it's like what makes us so great at this. And then when we tie all of that stuff together, that's been huge for us. So
And it's fun.
And yeah,
it's so fun.
We love it.
That we sometimes are like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough time. How do
Yeah.
we do this? And we
Yeah.
just have a great time.
Yeah. And our team is phenomenal. Like, we have got such a group of people behind us every day, but then our team itself is such a nice core group of, like, everyone wants to learn more. No one is stuck thinking that they have all the answers. Like, we are
Yes.
really evolving every year. They're getting better and better. I'm the senior person on this team. I've been in this school the longest, and to just sit back and reflect on where we started and where we are now. It's like I could cry about it because
Yeah.
I'm so proud of these women, and they are in it for the right reasons, and they
Yes.
just want to see success in children because that's the key for their whole life. And it's amazing. We're so lucky.
Yeah. I mean, it's the science and the art of teaching, right? It's we have to have that science part, but you're talking about the art of, making it impactful and engaging for students and the collaboration side of it all as well.
Yeah, we're really lucky.
Yeah, we're very, and I guess one other component that we do have in our school is we do have social skill support. So we do have a counselor, a social worker that comes in once a week, and daily in our classroom we do a lot of meditations and learning coping skills and those things. We actually see kids a lot of times doing their finger breathing when they get to something hard during an assessment or when they're thinking. So those things they're like, not one thing is the answer. It's like all of the things. But it's been fun to watch them grow over the year and become more successful, and just knowing that
And independent.
and the trajectory of their lives is going in a really positive way, and we're really excited about that.
And that is so important. I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're building that foundation that's going to continue to get built upon, and giving them that ability, academically, but also fostering that independence and that desire to learn and ability to make mistakes and grow from them is so critical. I want to thank you, ladies, so much for giving us just a little snapshot into what it looks like in your community and in your classroom. I'm so grateful that our listeners get to learn from you. And as they listen to this episode, I just want to remind them, what you said in the beginning. This wasn't easy. It's not like you just picked up and you're like, oh, let's go, and everything fell into place. It's, I'm sure a lot of work and a continued work in progress, but I'm grateful that our listeners get to hear about your successes.
Well, thank you for having us. We're really, we're really grateful for the curriculums that you've developed. It made our lives a lot easier.
Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes where we explore literacy topics in a snack-sized, easily digestible format.